Hello, everybody. It's been a while, right? A long while since I don't even remember when we did the last one, but welcome to episode number 15 of the Full Contact Poker Podcast. We are live here in Las Vegas. Just got back from a trip to Barcelona to play in the PokerStars Championship. You know, even though they're called the PokerStars Championship, I'm just going to call them the EPT because screw it. It sounds cooler. It's not like any different really. So I'm going to call it EPT Barcelona. I don't care what anybody says. It's EPT Barcelona. There, done, said it. On the way home, I stopped in Indianapolis to do a keynote speech for a company called TCC, which essentially runs every Verizon store, I think everywhere in the world. I don't know, at least America for sure. Maybe Canada. I'm not 100% sure on that. That was a blast. I'll probably do a follow-up video at some point where I go over kind of some of the key parts of it and what I gathered from it. We shot some video here and there. They got the whole speech on video. It was about 45 minutes. And I've done corporate events before for lots of different companies. And, you know, they typically don't ask me to have sort of like a 45-minute keynote prepared. This one did, and I was super excited about it because I've sort of done this type of keynote in several different environments, typically in the poker world, not on the corporate level. But it was really cool to do it on the corporate level, and then after get so much really positive feedback. I had more than a few people. Actually, there was a lot of poker fans. You'd be shocked. I was walking the streets in Indianapolis, and there was a lot of people asking for pictures and things like that. But what was really cool to see was like some people that didn't know much about poker, like they'd come up to me like this, you know, and there were a lot of young people between say ages 22 and 30, and they'd look at me like, you know, I'm gonna be honest with you. When I heard like a poker player was speaking, I thought like, what the hell is he gonna teach us? But she said it was great, and she learned a lot, and we got to her goals and her vision. It was just really cool. It's something that's anytime you step out of your element, right? It always adds that little bit of excitement, fear. You can choose how you want to interpret the feeling, because really, when you think about it, right? Think about how you feel when you're afraid, and think about how you feel when you're excited. It's like the same feeling, right? So essentially, it's like a choice on how you want to take it. And I've played for $1 million pots on TV too, and lost more than a few. But I've also, been in that environment. I've been under the big lights in a tournament, and my juices don't flow nearly as much as they do. I'm doing public speaking to a group of, I think it was about 1,200 people there. Real 1,200 people, not like, made up. There were pictures. They were legit. It wasn't fake news or nothing. So I didn't do a podcast during the summer. As you guys know, I was doing vlogging, and since then, I really just want to take a sort of step back, relax a little bit. It was a grind. We did 45 days in a row of vlogs, and I was doing YouTube videos and that kind of thing. So then I, hit over to Barcelona. Just didn't feel up to doing vlogs, but I will be doing them soon, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Before we do, I want to talk a little hockey. I've been thinking about this, and I've been doing a lot more like radio shows, hockey talk radio shows, like Dollar Prospects, which is a podcast about prospects, and I spend way too much time studying the junior draft and hockey, and I love it so much that I thought, you know what, and this is just a maybe, I'm not sure I'm going to do this. I think maybe when we have hockey here and the Vegas Golden Knights are official, I might just do after games when I go attend them, like a 10 to 15 minute wrap up of what I saw and all that kind of stuff. Some more mainstream different things, because I really just kind of enjoy doing that. The poker world is great and the community is great, but it's like obviously, poker centric, and I have a lot more interests than just poker. So I think that might be a lot of fun for you puck fans that want to stay up to date on things relevant to Las Vegas and our hockey team. But the topic of discussion for this podcast is going to be angle shooting. All right. Now, this all stems from a short little clip video where Patrick Leonard, Plano Pads on Twitter, was involved in a hand on the live stream with cards down, so we don't get to see what they actually had. And and the way the hand played out on the river, he was facing a large bet, and he said, "You got it, nice hand, you got it." I believe. Just to verify, why don't we go ahead and, if you got the clip, let's play the clip, and you'll hear the audio of just how much time passed in between, and we'll go from there. So let's play the clip real quick.
They can agree with my career choice if I can make about a good fold here. If you show me a bluff, I look really stupid. But it's hard to be bluffing, I guess. It's hard to be bluffing, I guess. All right, you got it.
Does he ever have just an
Nice
ace?
Yeah, okay, that's strong.
I'm not a huge fan of saying you got it and then not folding.
Oh, that is a bit of an angle in my opinion. He has now folded. And the pot goes to Luigi Shihada, who is now up over 400,000, up over 100 bigs.
All right, so as you can see there, clearly Patrick was trying to get a read on his opponent. And he was trying to figure out, if he was strong or weak. And a lot of people, and I put up a poll because I was curious what people thought, is this an angle shoot or not, right? And I'm gonna give you my take on it, okay? So I've listened to a few other podcasts that have talked about this, and I think they really miss out on understanding fully what an angle shoot is. And, the fact that they're legal, right? The reason an angle shoot is because you are essentially, you are bending a rule that is legal in order to benefit from it, right? If it was not legal, the floorman would come and rule and say, you can't do that. Now, the question was this an angle shoot? And really the true answer, the ultimate answer is undetermined, right? Essentially, in a case like this, you sort of have to take Patrick at his word that he was folding anyway. We didn't have the benefit of seeing hole cards, so we couldn't see how strong or weak he was in this. He claims to have, had a bad hand and was just trying to get a read. Now, the issue arises with something like this if he didn't execute an angle shoot, right? At least we don't know for sure. Whether he had a hand that he felt was a really strong hand, picked up a tell, and then decided to fold after the fact. So we don't know what his hand was, so we have to take his word for it. And I see no reason not to. He doesn't seem like a guy who has a history of angle shooting. So there's no real reason to condemn or vilify there. Now, the real question comes is what would have happened if the opposing player turned his card up and said, phew, and shows a bluff, right? That's where an angle could have happened if Patrick would have said, I call now, or I want to call now, right? Now that's like an angle shoot. Now, of course, Matt Savage and every tournament director will tell you, and they're right, that players are responsible for protecting their own hand, and there's no question that's true. But angles look to take advantage of, I guess, what you would call unethical situations where people kind of make innocent mistakes and are become victim to vultures who are looking to sort of bend the rules so that they can take advantage of stuff like that. Obviously, again, I'm all about personal responsibility and making sure that you're always aware of, even the Alec Torelli thing. A lot of people were talking about an angle, and I found that really ridiculous, frankly. When you show the video, both videos of Alec Torelli, in one, you see he moved chips or whatever. I don't care at all where he puts his chips. Typically in a deep stack cash game, it's not even a thing. When you play live deep stack poker, if you want to play a big pot against somebody, you typically say something like, do you have any big chips? Recently, I played a hand against Tom Guan, if you guys saw it on Poker Go, the Poker After Dark hand where he had aces, Antonio had kings, I had queens. And, Tom asked, do I have any big chips there? Because he wanted to stand responsible, right? I don't think Alec Torelli was shooting an angle with ace-queen. He had ace-frickin' queen. You don't necessarily want to get called with ace-queen. That's not exactly setting this monster cool trap where you're going to be able to exploit people. So I don't really see the real big angle there. I just think it was overall, okay, yeah, he probably should have put his big chips in front, but I don't see that an angle was exploited at all. And it seemed like, from my point of view, in terms of what Alec was saying, he was more than willing to do business. He didn't want to give up an edge in terms of giving away the strength of his hand, but he said to the guy okay, whatever you want to do kind of thing, make a proposal, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I don't think, of all the angles that I've seen over the last 20 years, that kind of stuff is what I would classify as angle shooting. Now, the situation with Patrick reminds me of some old school angles that I'll bring up in just a moment. But in this case, ultimately, if I were to guess, I don't think Patrick shot an angle. The question is, if the player were to muck his hand and Patrick took the pot, that's an angle. If the player turned over his hand or even said, phew, I had nothing, and wanted to call after that, after about whatever it was, 8 to 12 seconds or something like that, now that would have been an angle. That's not what Patrick did. Patrick did do a video, 15 minutes, explaining his thought process, and I don't know, part of it was kind of I don't know that that's okay either, but whatever. It's all fine. When you're table talking, trying to get reads, I wouldn't call that, angle shooting. Maybe pushing the envelope just a little bit, but, all's well and good. I ultimately spoke to Patrick about it privately, and like I said, I don't think he shot an angle. I think, though, the pause of 12 seconds, certainly anytime I'd see somebody do that, I'd be like, whoa, dude, what was that, right? And I think even Patrick, when he watched the video back, acknowledged that it was looks kind of, skeptical and looks kind of shady. The one thing that I saw some media members bring up, and I thought, like, this is like some crazy ass conspiracy shit. The idea that like somehow like PokerStars was pushing this to discredit Patrick in some way. The commentators saw that. The commentators' job is to like talk about what's happening. That was peculiar. I think by anybody who watched the video sees that and says, I haven't seen that. I've been playing 20 years. I've never seen anyone do that before. I've literally never seen someone say, you know, you got it, nice hand, you got it, not muck their hand, try to get a read, and then like, you know, muck. I've never seen it. So when I see something like that, if I was in the commentary, I'd be like, whoa, what was that over there? And it would bring up, you know, a question. I decided to run the poll because I was bored in my room in Barcelona and I saw the video and I decided, like, what do people think? So that'd be a good conversation starter. And often when I'm bored, I'll do that on Twitter. There was no connection to anyone between PokerStars that are like specifically going after. That part was like a little ridiculous to think that there was like some sort of conspiracy. That was like, I don't know, silly. There's no conspiracy. I just put up the poll because I thought, you know, it's interesting. I've never seen anything like that in 20 years. So anyway, I don't think Patrick is a bad guy. I think he's a good guy. I don't think he acknowledged in his video, I don't think he handled it all that well initially, like, and he acknowledges that. Typical, like when someone comes after you, you're gonna be defensive. I've been through it myself, you know, where people come at me and I'm like, yo, you know, you want to step to them and you're like, this ain't cool, that's not me. But he definitely acknowledged it because he didn't, you know, right off the bat, I was like, dude, just take personal responsibility and realize that like that could have been perceived as you take shooting an angle, you know, and move forward. Because, you know, the vast majority of people who see that are going to be like, looks like opportunity for an angle there. Now, let's talk about some real angles, okay? I mean, like I said, I've been around a long time. And this is what reminded me of, this is like what I saw here with the Patrick thing, reminded me of an old school hand. There was a tournament in Vienna. It was a heads-up championship many years ago. There was a guy named Ron Rose who was a recreational player for the most part. Well, yeah, he was a wealthy guy. And he was playing the tour for a little while, and he got in this heads-up tournament, and he was up against Amarillo Slim. So now he's up against Amarillo Slim. They're in this televised, right, which is great because we get to see the hole cards. Otherwise, you know, we wouldn't have been able to see how clearly Amarillo Slim shot a most blatant angle you can imagine. There's a hand where it's raised and re-raised pre-flop, and so Slim raised the button. Ron Rose 3-bets from the, you know, 3-bets him heads up, and it comes like King 7-3 rainbow, right? Ron Rose bets, okay? Amarillo Slim says, let's go, right? All right, he says, all right, let's go, and grabs his chips like he's putting them in the middle. So, you know, Ron Rose, an amateur player, he turns his hand face up. Okay, he has 3 freaking kings. He's got the nuts, right? So Amarillo Slim sees that he's got the nuts. Amarillo Slim has ace king. Okay, top. He's never folding. It was like a big bet, and it was like an automatic shove. There was no way he ever gets away from it. So Amarillo Slim now goes into his, you know, old school tirade of like, he's like, I ain't call. He says, I wouldn't call that man on the phone. I said, let's go on to the next hand. I'm like, what the fuck? So this is one of those spots where like, I guess part of one of my beef is with tournament directors in general. And I understand the tough job a guy like Matt Savage and the other have who run the TDA of like making rules uniform so that, you know, there's a simple rule. In spots like this, I wish there was some wiggle room for some common sense, because within the TDA rules, for example, if you say to somebody, you know, I fold, that's a fold. But if you can say like, you win, you got it, nice hand, you can say those things and it's not considered verbally binding. It doesn't actually mean fold. Right? I wonder if we should put that in there. Like I'm saying, I think you win, I think you got it. There's a huge difference between I think you got me, I think you got the nuts, versus you got me. There's just a huge difference there. So hopefully, I don't know. I think it's worth looking at, specifically with what happened here. But Amarillo Slim black there, like clearly this is what an angle is, right? Now everyone could say, well, Ron should have turned his hand up. Yes, of course. You can be that guy, like whatever. But like the fact is like, you know, we should never do that to a guy who's like an amateur. And it was like big buy-in too. I don't know if it was a 10 or 25K. For back then, it was ridiculously big buy-in in Vienna. So anyway, Amarillo Slim got away with it because he didn't say call. He said, let's go, like that. And so Ron Rose had to, he ended up, I think Ron Rose, I don't remember if he won it. But I mean, I wish he would have, I don't know. But it's pretty ridiculous, right? So that's like a clear, silly angle. Another guy, old school guy. And see, back then, like angles weren't seen, I guess the same as today. Like today, I think the average poker player is a little bit more morally like upstanding citizens, right? Like if there's a better term for that, let me know. Back in the day, angles and hustling on the golf course and all that stuff, that was just part of being a good gambler, right? Making sure that you get an edge on all your opponents and they don't take advantage of you. So Puggy Pearson used to do this thing where you won't be able to see it if you're listening to the podcast, but like he would do this thing where he would grab chips within his hand and he would move the chips forward in his hand till where he got to the betting line, right? So he's almost at the betting line, basically, saying he's going to bet, usually limit poker, and the other player would like go to call, and then he would tap the table with his elbow. He'd pull this move, he'd be like this, and be like, check it, right? So, basically looking for free information. He wants to bet, but once he knows his opponent's going to call because he forward motioned it. He would check when he was bluffing and continue the bet when he wanted to get called, right? So clearly an angle shoot, basically like prototypical angle shoot. More recently, and I want to preface this by saying I actually really like this guy. We just never agree on virtually anything about anything, but I like him. I think he's overall I think he's a good person, but I think that his view of like angle shooting in poker is distorted. And I'm talking about one and only Shaun Deeb. Okay, so Shaun Deeb, we've got a few here for Shaun. So Shaun Deeb, there was his hand in the World Series of Poker with a couple tables left. This wasn't this year; it was a year before. They're playing Raz, and he was playing against the cash game player. Now, cash game players, typically what you'll see in a cash game is, a guy has deuce 3 showing in Raz, which has the lead against like a guy who has an ace, and then he catches a jack, right? So the deuce 3 is like, obviously going to bet, so he's, goes for his chips, and the other guy just throws the call out because he's like, okay, let's go on to Fifth Street. So just a pretty standard thing for cash game players to do. Now, as far as the rules go, if a player hasn't bet or checked yet, and you bet out of turn, it's binding, right? Now, even though in Raz, like, there's virtually no situation where if your guy's board is deuce 3 and you catch like, and you have like deuce jack or something like that, you're never really going to bet. I mean, there are some times where you just know your guy has a real bad one in the hole and you might bet it, but typically the jack 4 is not betting. So here's what Shaun Deeb did. He went to reach for his chips, like he's going to bet his deuce 3, which is totally standard. And his opponent, this cash game guy, threw out the chips to call before Shaun had put the chips in. So Shaun said, which is totally within the rules, that bet is binding, and he check raised him, right? So that's a situation where, if Shaun were to like have done the Puggy thing and really like stretched it out like he was angling the guy, much, much worse. Either way, I think this is a spot typically where most players would not take advantage of the guy and just leave it at one bet, right? Now, again, you will go back to personal responsibility. The guy's supposed to know the rules in a tournament. He bet out of turn. Shaun didn't put the chips in yet. Shaun didn't do anything against the rules, right? So he understands the rules very, very well, and he's going to always look to use them in his favor. This is a case where I wouldn't have, and I consider it pretty angly. It's more angly, like I said, if he's really like doing the forward motion thing, like he's going to bet. And there was discrepancy. I wasn't there live to see that one, so I can't say for certain exactly how much, how far Shaun was towards betting versus like, the guy just putting the call out of turn. So I wasn't there firsthand, so I can't say for sure. Either way, if I was in that spot with the deuce 3 and the guy bet out of turn, I would not take advantage of it unless it's Shaun, because against Shaun, I know he'd do it to me, so I'm going to raise him. And a lot of situations arise where, you would make a different decision based on how you think your opponent would like make a decision for you. So in certain situations when there's a brouhaha, like if I was up against a friend, I'm like, you know what, this is a mess, let's just chop the pot. Because I know the other person would do that for me. If it's somebody that I don't, feel like we have that kind of relationship or just would never do that to me, well then it doesn't make sense for me to exploit myself by, doing something for them that they wouldn't do for me. Or like giving somebody the last bet back or anything along those lines. Excusez-moi. Along those same lines, Shaun Deeb again. Same year, was sitting at I think it was a Raz tournament again. Yeah, he was on my left. And there was another player on Shaun's left who was an amateur player, was an older player, wearing glasses, and he would like lift his cards up real high, like this. And, too high because people on his left and right could probably see them. So anyway, make a long story short, I was at the table for this one, so this one was legit. The guy lifted up his cards. Shaun saw his cards, right? It was like on 6th Street or something. And Shaun could see his cards. And so Shaun called the floor to try to kill the guy's hand for exposing his hand, right? I'm like, dude, come on. The guy, he's like, oh, he showed his cards. It was like, because Shaun couldn't beat the guy's hand, right? Obviously. Like, now thinking a lot deeper, like, why would the guy show, that he has you beat. It's not like a Jamie Gold-esque play. This guy's not sophisticated enough, and I don't think Shaun took into account enough the fact that this is an amateur. I think Shaun was just looking to, hey, if there's a rule that I can benefit from, I'm gonna try to shoot it or use it. And this goes back to way back. I'm gonna talk about something that's been discussed for years. It was a hand where I was accused of angle shooting in a spot where Shaun Deeb was angle shooting. We were at the World Series of Poker Europe in London. And we were in the blinds. I was in small blind, big blind. And like I said, we're friendly, so we were chit-chatting, and I was like, we were joking. He was like, oh, I know what you're going to do. You're going to limp and blah. And I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm like, way out. If everyone folds, I'm going to limp, and you're going to raise, and I'm going to pound you back, right? I said that pre. I think I said that pre. Pound you back. Anyway, long story short, it comes around to me in the small blind. I have 2 7s. And I say, I'm going to pound you back. Oh, no, pardon me. I limp first. Sorry, yeah, I limp with the 7s, as we said we we're going to do. He raises with the king 9 off, okay? And I say, I'm going to pound you back, right? And I put one hand in and the other, and you can find the video. Put one hand in and the other hand in a fluid motion, which back then wasn't really it was really borderline string bet because there was no pause. So it was like, I put the call and the raise, and the right hand came a little bit after. But I did say, I'm going to pound you back, right? And I did do this. So this is where a lot of people think I shot an angle. Because when the floor man came over, I said, pound you up. I said pound it up. I don't know why the fuck I did that. It just probably to make my case better because I felt like he was trying to take a free flop in a spot where it was clearly obvious that, I was raising and he was the one trying to shoot an angle by getting a free flop. There was no angle. There's no angle possible that I could get by string raising in that spot because there's no other players in the pot. So it's me in the small blind. He's already raised. What if I go if I'm going like this to raise? There's nothing I can get as far as an angle from him. He's not folding when I call, right? There's no reaction I'll get in that millisecond. So anyway, he tried to basically, as far as I was concerned, shoot an angle on me, and then it became this big thing where I shot an angle. And the only area I could see where people would, have a case that, my angle was present is I basically tried to make a better case for myself by saying I said the word up, and I didn't say the word up. I said pound me back. As it turns out, it didn't matter because pounded up or pounded back do not qualify as words that under the TDA would, you can't say shoot it up buttercup, raisy daisy. None of that stuff actually is a thing. I just thought because we were, playful, we were joking, I was really surprised. This was my first altercation with him to see something like that. And had I known, what I know now about Shaun, I would be a lot more careful in those spots because I know that he'll, if he won't, he's not the kind of guy that you go, oh, it's fine. You just have to shoot every angle against him because he will against you. So I didn't know that at the time, but I learned my lesson, Shaun, and I'll be careful with you. I'm never going to be I'm just going to be robotic and just mind my business. But anyway, like I said, I like Shaun. We have a very different view on how to handle these types of situations. Yeah. So another thing, I don't know what else did I want to bring up. I got all those in there. Yeah. So there's another one that was famous. And Play Notepads actually, Patrick posted this poll about whether or not I shot an angle on what was it? I think it was in Bahamas. I don't know. It was against a guy named Zugwat. That was his online name. And I was on the button with ace king, and I made it 11x. Okay? I was trying to make it 9,500 or supposedly, right? And then I made it 45,000, which was a ridiculously large raise. He had a big stack. I had a big stack. So he sees this for what it is, which is a misclick. And he decides to go all in with king jack. I snap him off with ace king. Once I made the misclick, I did act. I was oops, this. I was trying my best to play the situation was the situation. So anyway, make a long story short, he moves in. I call with ace king, and I beat him. And a lot of people were talking about angle shooting. I said, many of you maybe don't think that lie detectors are accurate or whatever, but I'd happily take a lie detector test that was a legitimate misclick. I actually misclicked. I've done it plenty of times. In the one drop, I did it 3 times. I did it in a spot that was so freaking stupid with aces, where it was raise, call, and I was in the big blind, and I basically min clicked from the big blind. Not something I would ever do, right? I don't want 4 people in with aces with 14 left, and it pays 9 in the $1 million one drop. Pretty stupid to think that I did it in there. But the chip denominations were weird and goofy. So in that case, it was a misclick, and I'd happily take a lie detector test and bet a lot of money, on the outcome that it was a misclick. Alrighty, so let's move on. I think we covered the whole angle shooting thing. If you have any cool angles, that you've seen. Let me know in the comments down below some of the funnier ones. And like I said, back in the day, they were mostly seen as funny, like Danny Robinson and Puggy Pearson. There's some great old school stories of stuff that these guys used to do to each other because they were always trying to one-up each other. And it was weird because it's like, you're cheating me, I'm cheating you, but it's like, they laugh about it. You know, there's a humor around it. Like a Puggy Pearson story, golf story, right? You know this one, right, Christian? So Puggy was notorious for cheating at golf, right? So he hits a shot, you know, it's a par 4, he hits it into the water. Everyone sees it's like, yeah, basically went to the water. So now he drives up, you know, he's the first one up there, and it's like, whoa, it stayed up. And they're like, stayed up, right? So they see a ball right there, and like, wow, I guess maybe people just didn't see right. So one of the golfers, you know, that was there looks in the water. You see like a ball right there, and it's like, you know, they flush it out. And it happens to say Puggy on it, right? It says Puggy on the ball. So Puggy shrugs and goes, honest mistake, right? And then he's like, well, and someone said to him, he's like, Puggy says, well, I hope you learned your lesson. He's like, I sure did, never to put my damn name on the balls. There's a whole bunch of stories like that. And again, it was a different time, different culture. Like today, that's just, I guess being cheated or trying to cheat the other person, which I'm happy to hear, is not part of like the way in which, unless it comes to paying in debts, because we've seen that happening recently where, you know, there's one specific casino owner who has played poker on more than one occasion, lost some money, and then said, here's what I'll give you. Like, oh, I owe you 4.6. How about 1.2? You can take 1.2 or leave it, right? And or like, you know, this happened twice, and one of them he's being sued for. Really surprising to see this happen, and really surprising to see so many people kind of like, I don't know if be okay with it, but like I think a lot of people understand, and I don't know why I'm not naming him, but yeah, I'm gonna name him. What the hell? It was Leon. So Leon, the Casino Kings owner, allegedly, you know, was on a podcast on 2+2 with Adam and Terrence. We're talking to Elton saying about a situation where he was playing a game, made over 3 sessions, he won $4.6 million, and Leon came to him and said, I want to cancel the last game. Cancel? I'm like, okay, lost like 3.4 million in that one. So he says, I'll give you 1.2. He's like, take it or leave it kind of thing. So, so there's that. And then there was the Aussie Matt situation at the Aria where Aussie Matt is actually suing Leon. Apparently, like Aussie Matt lost like 1.5, I don't know the exact numbers here, but he lost like 1.5 or 2 million to Leon earlier in the day, paid him full amount. Now Leon comes back later, drinking or whatever. Apparently Aussie Matt wins the money back, plus like 1.5 million or 2 million or something like that. And Leon says, I'll give you 1 million or something like that. Again, I don't have the exact specifics other than I know that like Aussie Matt lost money, paid it, won it back, and Leon didn't pay him the money. So he's suing there. So, you know, you see something like that once, you wonder, okay, what's that about? You see it twice and it starts to become a pattern. And I'm just, you know, I wonder how there's so many people that are around him, haven't explained to him, like from a reputational perspective, how damaging that can be to just have a reputation as being a guy who, if you play high stakes poker with, he might just not pay you. So I guess, you know, if you want to protect yourself, again, it's one of those things where you just make sure that, you know, you don't give credit to people you don't know, especially if you're playing for ridiculously high stakes. You know, I mean, what else can you say? I guess in some environments it just works out. Like if you're playing private games or home games, you know, not everybody brings, if they're playing high stakes, not everybody brings $1 million to somebody's house. They usually play on credit. So I guess you have to really trust and, you know, have a real deep trust. And someone like, you know, Leon, based on these 2 incidents, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire, there's 2. It would be hard to, you know, make the decision to say, okay, this seems like a good idea to play him on credit, right? So just if you play with him, I would suggest not playing on credit because, you know, it might end up poorly for you. I want to talk a little bit about one of the recent PokerStars changes. In Barcelona, we had yet another meeting with the players. We had a successful one in Monte Carlo where we implemented a lot of the changes the players wanted to see. And we did another one here in Barcelona. It was about a 4-hour meeting. We covered all things online. We covered live tournaments and stuff like that, because there's definitely been much more focus from PokerStars on live events and making sure that they're better, because I think there was a philosophy shift, and I think now with David Carrion being in charge of marketing, he finds I guess a better approach to handling live events than where we were headed. I think live events are losers basically for the most part, right? Like when you hold a live event and you have all those people, yeah, a lot of money comes in, but they're actually not overall, like you don't make, your goal is to like break even with them. They've always been like marketing tools to bring people to your site, to promote the brand and all those kind of things. Well, there was like a push to basically try to start profiting from those things, right? And it just doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work. Players don't want to be squeezed. So as I mentioned in a previous video, one thing PokerStars did was for Bahamas, they have lowered the rake in half. They've cut it by 50%, all like turbo events that have like blind levels that are 15 minutes or less, because it makes more sense. Like, your edges are much smaller in turbo events, so it makes sense to lower the rakes. The other thing they did was on high buy-in events, like sometimes the rake is as much as $2,000 and $100K or $1,000. There's a cap now of $300. So when you were paying $2,000 before and $2,000 per re-entry, you're paying $300 now. It's a pretty significant dip. And it's like, again, the philosophy I'm a big fan of. It represents to me like a shift in terms of the direction of like where the company's going in that area, especially with live events, to make sure that we like never lose focus on why PokerStars events globally were always considered to be like, you know, we had the best parties, the best tournament staff, the best run tournaments, the best value, all those kind of things. So rededicating to that, I think, is super important. And, you know, they shared in the meeting a lot of things that they're going to do along those lines. One of the things, this one, I think for the most part, based on what I'm seeing from feedback, the vast majority of players really like this. Maybe there's a few that don't. And essentially what they're doing is, if you win you play in these satellites on PokerStars, right? To win a package to Bahamas, for example, right? Well, there's a lot of guys who basically, like pros, you know, they're like pros at these, they just play those and they play as many as they can and try to win as many as they can, and they just, you know, turn the money into cash. What we found was, what you see is the number of unique people coming to the live events gets smaller, right? Because you have repeat winners, you have less people winning packages. Also, those players that, you know, you want there, like the recreation players, they're usually losing, and they're losing a lot because they're playing against better players. So the shift that's been made, and again, I think this is, for the most part, been received really, really well, is once you've won a package, you can't play them anymore. So you can't win 2 packages. What that does is it makes it a little more feasible. And I've already heard from several recreational players who said, oh, I'll play those now. They wouldn't before, because they come to understand that, like, mostly it's like 35 regs that are, you know, playing, and it's like they're going to have a tough time beating them. So now if all those guys are, you know, winning their kit package and then they can't play no more, it makes the field a lot softer for them. So from one perspective, like, the positive is you'll get more unique players, more of like the right kind of players into the main events, which means they're better value, which means those that are traveling, pros that don't win packages, will, you know, their ROI is going to increase as a result. Now, the negative is obvious. So the negative is, or it should be obvious, is that without that core group of guys who help make these things run, you know, a lot of time they just won't run, right? So once 50 guys have won a package, now there's 50 less guys that are playing in these satellites. So if a recreational player does want to play one, maybe he doesn't have as many options to do so. Now, some of the ways to fix that are to have more like megas, more like bigger ones, and have less of them, and more concentrated within the schedule. So there's a lot of talk about the scheduling of different events. It's funny, Adrian Mateos was in the meeting, and he's like, I think, he said it like 7 times in a different way. His English is not perfect, but he's like, I think we need more big buy-in tournaments. He's like, we need more high-limit tournaments. It's like, it was a kind of a running joke, because it was like, every time Adrian was like, well, yeah, but I think what we need now, more tournaments, big ones. It's like, everybody started cracking up. And that's actually the same, we heard the same thing from Bryn Kenny and Jason Wheeler at the previous meeting in terms of like what they want, because they found that with PokerStars kind of like not offering as many of these high stakes events, that these players were starting to like spread their play out. They really just want to play on PokerStars. It's easier, convenient, it's the best software, all those things, but they were finding that in order to fill their Sundays or their Tuesdays to play enough tables, they were playing on other sites as well. So I guess the real question, you know, like, what is the upside, what is the downside of offering these things? And ultimately, I think if the players want to play, even if it's a group of like the same 70, 80 guys, if they all want to play, why not? You know, I think offer it up. And I think, you know, you'll see based on the numbers, like, you don't necessarily have to slap guarantees on them. This is something that these players want to play, and we should be able to offer it to them without, you know, taking any real risk. Because anytime you put guarantees on tournaments, you of course take risk, and risk can often, like, you know, cut into the bottom line, which obviously matters to people making the schedule, the higher ups, and the stockholders as well. So I think that's a good change. I think what that'll do is help pump more people into the main events, which is good. I really think Bahamas is going to be like amazing. I do. I think like last year was kind of a wake-up call. I don't, for me, and listen, I'm obviously a PokerStars guy, like I was disappointed with the fact that we had, Kevin Hart playing in the high roller. There's no stream. We had, Aaron Paul there. There was like no, real opportunity to leverage all those things. They had like 7,000 tournaments on the schedule, so a lot of them had like 9 people and stuff like that. The buy-in is $5K, which means it's very difficult for grinding regs to like justify flying to Bahamas, paying the exorbitant costs that that are required to stay in a place like that. So there's a rededication to like 400 qualifiers, more packages being available, more people qualifying so that their expenses are covered within the packages that they win, and overall making it like a big juicy tournament full of high rollers, low rollers, but like not 1,000 tournaments. I think something like 30 events throughout the entire festival, which makes a lot more sense. Have less events with more people in them. I think that's a win-win for everyone. Coming up on the schedule, we've got Poker Masters, okay? I did a little video on YouTube about like what's good for poker, and it's frustrating me because I saw some people, mocking it and all this kind of stuff, and I think, man, you guys, like, you shit on something before you even understand like what is like potentially going to be created with this. Like I said this in the video, but the World Series of Poker, when it started, it was like just a group of gamblers who played poker for a weekend, and they voted for Johnny Moss as like best player. So he won a bracelet. Like he was the first trophy winner. Like that's pretty dumb, right? But look what the World Series became. It evolved into something. Now, when you think about the Purple Jacket, it's 5 events, 50K buy-in, 100K buy-in in the last one, with literally all the killers, like the top killers in the world in terms of poker, facing off against each other. And the special reward is, for the year, you will be called the Poker Masters. In golf, they have a Masters where they give a green jacket. So obviously that's where the idea comes from. And I'm sure the first year when they did that for the Masters, like you give a guy a green jacket, you're like, who cares? Where's my money? You know what I'm saying? But anytime we can do things like that to help promote the game or add some extra buzz around it, I think that's good. We want more fan engagement. We want more people like betting on stuff like this. We want more people. Like I actually think, a guy like Timex who runs that Poker Shares thing, I think he's doing the poker community a service to some degree because, there's more fan interest. I think it's great. Like Poker Go, they have to create more content, right? So we've got Poker After Dark's back. We've, of course, got World Poker Tour final tables on the schedule now. We've got World Series of Poker as we've got, this new show. Oh my God, Major Wager. Oh boy, this one's embarrassing. Major Wager is like a prop betting show. One of the episodes is myself against Sam Abernathy. Play some golf. We do some Cirque du Soleil shit. And I'm just not that flexible. So so basically they got the pokerographies. The goal is to just create a wide variety of content. So this could be one of those things that grows into something. The Super High Roller Bowl, which is 3 years in now, was like whatever, and then all of a sudden, this is like, I think, one of the most prestigious events in the world, maybe the most prestigious, and it came from an idea. So before you poo-poo this and the Purple Jacket thing, I think it's a stupid idea. First of all, you ain't playing in it anyway, right? It doesn't cost you anything, and maybe, just maybe, instead of being so cynical and negative about stuff, you could see that, well, you know what? Free roll. Like, again, I'm not going to go over the entire video, but I talked about the GPL, the Global Poker Index, all this kind of stuff that Alex Dreyfus was trying to do. Again, first season, I think it's fair to say, didn't go as well as he would have liked. But, he's taking that brand now to like China and India, and it's like trying to create some more interest in markets that haven't really had their boom yet. So who does that hurt? Hope he's successful. I want everybody to be successful. We recently had a King of the Hill. Our one and only Phil Hellmuth won it. Yeah, he beat some tough competition and won that. And like, it's a made-for-TV thing. Like I said in the video, it doesn't mean anything, that he won this thing, but it's like awesome. It's a lot of people, find interest. Every Live at the Bike does something to try to create interest. Like, all this stuff is good. Like, being cynical and poo-pooing stuff, because you're not involved in it, or because, you just want to be that guy, doesn't help the community at all. Like, we want this stuff to thrive. We want people to be like, we want to make the Poker Masters cool. We want to make it like the Super High Roller Bowl cool, right? You're going to get live streams of like, if you have Poker Go, which you should, and if you don't have it yet, use my promo code Daniel, and you will save $10 off an annual subscription. And it's worth it because we're coming out with lots more content. You'll get to watch like some of the best players in the world go at it, and that's worth the $10 because you will probably get lessons from the types of players that will be there, like a Fedor Holtz and the like, on like what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how do they play against each other. Like, who doesn't want to watch the Masters? The whole point of the golf Masters was people want to see the best of the best. Well, that's what you're going to see with the Poker Masters. So tune in, don't hate until you see, and I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. Fingers crossed. The other thing, as I mentioned before, that Poker Go has been releasing is Poker After Darks. I played in the very first one, cash game. Lots of fun. I ended up winning about 142,000 or so. If you haven't seen it yet, you need to. Or like, I don't know how many people have seen it, probably 1 million already. The hand with where Tom Dwan has aces, Antonio has kings, I have queens. I swear I almost laid it down for the first bet. And it's frustrating when people talk about the hand, and it's like they're talking about, well, Antonio 5-bet. No, it wasn't a 5-bet. It was a straddle. It was a blind raise. So it was like play 2-4, he made it 8. I raised on the button. That's the raise. Then, you know, the Durr re-raises, and then Antonio 4-bets. But Antonio was really playing kind of frisky, because I really thought about laying down the queens, because I had a really awkward stack. I had to call like 37 more, and I had about 250 or so in front of me. So kind of an awkward amount. It's like, do I go all in? Do I fold? When I call, I kind of play my hand face up, but it feels like queens are too like good to fold and not be exploitable. Like, what the hell if I'm going to fold queens there? Like, basically, I'm only calling 1 or 2 hands ever. But I ended up folding when raised. I was going to fold anyway. I was sure of it. And of course, Antonio got coolered, lost $700,000-800,000 pot. The game played massive. And then the next few days, Tom and Aussie Matt and Andrew Roble bought in for millions and putting the doubles and triple straddles on it. So I think for poker people who have been like dying for some high stakes poker action and for some of that old Poker After Dark stuff, you will not be disappointed, and you'll have it in the archives if you get it, right? So if you subscribe, remember, promo code is what? What's the promo code? Do you remember? Daniel, correct. Use the promo code, save $10, and have like some of the best poker action you're going to find available to you on Poker Go. That's about going to wrap it up. I want to talk a little bit about my speech in Indianapolis that I mentioned, the keynote, and kind of go over the whole goal for it, right? So it was a rally for people in the industry to kind of like, because Verizon is in that place right now, much like PokerStars in a lot of ways, actually, where they are, the best at what they do. They are the market shareholder. They're considered the best at most things. So one of the dangers when you get to the top in poker or in business is complacency, right? And I think the best remedy for complacency is competition. So I'm rooting for competitors in the industry, let's say for online poker. I'm heavily rooting for them to continue to up their game, right? Bring players more options, because when you give players more options, it forces every operator to offer more, and the players get more, and there's like incentive for them, right? This is just going to happen with any time you have a monopoly or close to a monopoly. The consumer is the one that typically suffers. So competition is good. During poker's heyday, right, when poker was at its peak during the boom, you had PokerStars and Full Tilt in an arms race, literally like in an arms race, to sign every imaginable player, dumping tons of money into sponsorships, giveaways, free rolls, packages, seats. You even had Ultimate Bet and Party Poker to a lesser degree at the time doing this kind of thing. That was obviously really good for poker. Obviously, since Black Friday, PokerStars bailed out Full Tilt. And since that point, there's really been nobody in the industry outside of PokerStars that has been making the spend to bring in new players. So the way that it works is essentially PokerStars spends the marketing dollars to bring people in the industry, and the rest of the sites have kind of like just piggybacked off that. Like the more people that get in online poker, the more they know about other sites, and so they sort of like can kind of free roll the marketing in terms of acquiring like totally new players. Now I'm not talking about people that are regular listeners to poker podcasts or watch poker news or are on the forums. Those people know about all the sites. I'm talking about new people. Like when we run an ad campaign with Cristiano Ronaldo, and all of a sudden Portugal, like the PokerStars.Portugal or whatever, PR or whatever it is, PT, is like the second largest poker site in the world, right? All new people, right? Without bringing in new deposits, the well goes dry, right? Obviously, there's a lot of decisions that PokerStars made that a lot of poker players, especially winning players, not going to like. Totally understand why they wouldn't. But from a business perspective, a lot of them, especially for a public company, were essential. Like, if for example, if you noticed a trend in a company and you were like the CEO and you were running the thing and you notice a continuous downward trend and you do nothing, like literally nothing to shift that trend, you can go to jail. Like not just, you could literally go to prison because, you could, I forget the name for it now, but there's a term for that. You have a fiduciary responsibility to the stakeholders and shareholders, right? So we saw a trend, right? There's clearly was a trend of less new deposits coming in, and the deposits that were coming in were not lasting as long because the games got tough, and the type of environments like in cash games, these players just get eat up by all the tough players, especially the ones that are like, most of these games are, really, really tough, right? And a new player today who walks in and plays, has $200 and goes wants to play 50 cents a dollar, he doesn't last like he did in 2004. In 2004, he might actually win for a while. He has no chance really, in most of those cash games because he's just outmatched. The winning player today, the separation between them and a new player is so much bigger. So the loss rate for these new players was so much quicker. What ends up happening as a result is you lose this player faster, and their redeposit rate goes way down. So one of the ways to fix that, and it's worked really well. And again, this is not something that pros like initially see as a good thing for them, is these like gimmicky games like spin and goes. Very, very popular. KO poker, beat the clocks, 5 to 10 minute little segments of like high variance, low edge kind of poker where they're going to lose. They're like very difficult to beat those things, even for pros. Like some of those formats just like super, super tough to like eke out a living, especially now without having like a real solid kind of VIP system that rewards volume, right? That's not what the chess system does. The chess system doesn't really reward high volume play like the old VIP system did. So from a pro's perspective, all those things can be seen as negative, but it's a trend that every competitor is doing too. Like the other companies are also creating games like that to bring people in, and we've seen reignition of a lot of dormant accounts that stopped playing. We're seeing the numbers going back up. They're playing more. And what we're also seeing is some of those players that play spin and goes and all this, they're like, hey, let me play some of these Sunday MTTs. Let me play some of these cash games. I want to play something a little more complex. So as a result of that, the pros get more players coming in to their games. Without these gimmicky things, it frankly just became a tough sell, right? For a lot of people, and this is the feedback we got on a lot of the surveys we did. They just found it boring. Like sitting in a 6-max 1-2 game with like 5 pros for the most part, and everyone playing pretty nitty. They just were not having as much fun. They're starting to have fun again, all right? Which is good. Like if they're having fun, they play more. And again, like I said, hopefully they trickle over into the multi-table tournaments and the cash games. Now it's almost as though this is like they're like in a pool that's kind of protected from pros, so that's why pros are so enraged. Again, like I said, I totally understand why you would be, but when you think about the bigger picture in terms of like, sort of, I'm going to screw up. I've lost my train of thought on that one. I don't want to say nothing too stupid that freaking gets edited down to a video, right? I'm kind of like off the cuffs right now. Christian's like, oh shit, what do I got to edit all this out now? We're good. But anyway, point being, ultimately is we're having conversations with professionals, recreational players on these meetings in Monte Carlo, in Barcelona, taking the feedback for creating like a playing experience that is more aligned with what people want, complaints with tournaments or structures or offerings or different things like that. And I feel like the meetings are going well. I do. I think that also, I think it's important too for a lot of the people that work for PokerStars to continue to reach out to the poker community and like let them know like they're real people. Like they're not monsters, right? They're like actual people who are listening, like they want to make things better. There's a lot of other pressures outside of that they also have to address in terms of like, shareholders, stakeholders, like higher ups and things like that. But I've found that for, as long as I've been with the company, there's always been a devotion to poker specifically, to making the offerings better, to making everyone happy. And since Black Friday, and obviously with losing Australian market and stuff like that, there's a lot more new challenges that have been created. Just the fact that players are so much better now than they used to be creates a dynamic that's difficult to, as I said, bring in new customers and say, hey, come on down, play this game. Oh yeah, you're gonna get absolutely destroyed and never win, but come and have some fun with us. So we try to create some more things along those lines. I think Power Up could be like a game breaker. Power Up Poker, I've mentioned it. If you want to check out a podcast I did previously, like going over all the cards, I think that everyone who's seen the game is kind of floored in how much gamification is involved in it. I think, speaking of gamification, I think one of the important things to consider is, like in 2004, the competition for the marketing dollar wasn't as tough as it is now. Back then, online poker, you had like PokerStars, competing against Full Tilt, whatever. Now, you're competing against Candy Crush. You're competing against Hearthstone. You're competing against freemium models like Farmville and all this kind of stuff where people spend their time and energy on things that they enjoy. So gaining traction and getting their attention requires innovation. And I think Power Up is going to do that for a lot of people, especially people that have played these types of games like Hearthstone or Magic that understand those dynamics. And for poker pros that want something new and fun, I've yet to meet someone who's played it and not like absolutely love it. I love it. Like I'm like really looking forward to it because I think it's a fun version of the game that, most importantly, will be difficult to ever solve because you can always, like in Hearthstone, we use a term called nerf. You can make a card worth less. You can buff a card. You can get rid of cards that are like, the power-up cards, so that it's going to be very difficult for people that are using tracking software or anything like that to come up with like a meta that they can really exploit for a very long time. So let's say, for example, with Hearthstone, what typically happens is all these new cards come out, right? So it changes the game completely. So the pros and the smart guys, they try to figure out what's the best strategy. So that takes them, like a couple months, and now, we got to figure it out. Like 2.5 months in, they got to figure it out. Well, now in 2 more weeks, they're coming out with all new cards. So by the time you figure it out, they've already switched it out, which gives, to some degree, I guess it's debatable who that helps the most, because I think the smartest people are typically the ones going to adapt the fastest. My main concern with Power Up is the edge gap. The skill gap might be really big, so that like recreational players have an even harder time of winning, because for anyone who's obviously played those formats like Hearthstone and stuff, they're going to have like sort of an inherent edge and understanding like how to combine the two games and two formats. But it remains to be seen. I'm super excited to get playing that. And so the speech. I was like totally off tangent. The speech. One thing I want to leave you with, which is what I left people with in the speech, because like I said, I was really trying to. I know why I got off on a tangent, because I was talking about PokerStars and Verizon. But anyway, my goal was to inspire them to continue to like stay ahead of the curve, right? And other things like that. It was really, really fun. Ultimately, it was a personal thing for each person there, and less about the company. And ultimately, I left them with a question. Okay, and I'm gonna leave it. It's a 2-part question. All right, so I'm gonna leave this question for you guys. What is a juicy goal that if you knew you couldn't fail, if you just knew no matter what, you went for this goal, you couldn't fail, what would that be for you? Okay, let me know in the comments down below. Okay, what would that be for you? A goal that you knew, absolutely knew, if you went for it, you'd be able to achieve it. Okay, now follow that up with, who would you have to become, right, to achieve that goal? So what is the goal, a juicy goal that if you knew you couldn't fail, you'd want to achieve, and follow that up with, who would you have to become to achieve such a goal, right? So for example, if you were somebody who's overweight and unhealthy, right, you're 100 pounds overweight, and you say that you want to run a marathon, okay, it's going to be tough. So who would you have to become, right? Probably a different person. You'd have to become somebody leaner, stronger, disciplined, focused, determined, whatever it is for you. So let me know the goal, and then underneath the follow-up, who would you have to become? Think about that one. Take your time. Throw that one in the comments down below if you're on YouTube, and if not, if you're listening to this on iTunes or whatever, let me know in the what do you call that? What do we call that, Christian? The reviews thing. Yeah, leave a review, and in your review, I'll read them. I'll check them out because I'm always curious. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to hear people strive for something, to achieve something in their life that is aligned with their dream life, and for when that light bulb goes off, they realize that, like, you know what? I could do this. It just requires effort, determination, focus, clear intention, the whole nine. So thanks everybody for listening. That's the end of the Full Contact Poker Podcast. Not sure exactly when we'll get the the next one in there. I might actually pull in a co-host. I got a couple ideas in mind for somebody because I think it'd be fun to have a back and forth. Like I said, I listen to all the poker podcasts. I think they're great. Shout out to Sarah and Brent at Poker News, to Terrence and Adam over, and then Ross, of course, at the 2+2 podcast, and of course Remco, WOC Poker, who has some takes, boy. This guy, oh my goodness, sometimes, right? And Brett Hanks. Who else did I forget? Oh, can't forget Joe Stapleton and James Hardigan. I never really think of that one as a poker podcast. Poker in the Ears, if you're looking for it. It's a really fun podcast, more news related, and movies and fun games and stuff. So shout out to all those guys. Give them all a listen. You know, these guys put in a lot of work to try to create content for you guys. So tune in, subscribe to all their podcasts, and we'll get back at you when we get back at you. See ya.